Good morning, everybody. My name's Jess Pearson and I'm the Consultant Psychologist at PPS. I have been uploading some videos since really COVID began, targeting mental health challenges that people have experienced during this time, and more recently, some general sort of psychology tips and tricks to help both individuals and businesses. So as you will see from the topic that we have put up today, my topic for today is going to cover assertive communication in the workplace. So we know that effective communication is so important in business. It goes without saying, sort of whether you're an employer or an employee. It helps us really to relate to our colleagues, obviously translate information efficiently, and it can foster really positive culture and innovation as well. So it's really worth learning about. Essentially, your communication style, and this is what I'm going to be speaking about a bit today, is the way in which you interact with others. So whether it's the words that you choose, the way in which you're acting, sort of your body language, or the way you react to another person, that all makes up your communication style. So what I'm going to be doing today is describing the 4 communication styles and essentially the influence that these can have on you as an individual, but also the person that you're communicating with. So essentially the idea is that by the time you've watched this video, you can identify which styles you and or your colleagues or employees tend to fall into and what their effects are. The 4th style, which is assertiveness, obviously the topic of today's video, is going to be discussed in a little bit more detail, as it's the one that is most helpful to you as the individual as well as the person you're communicating with. So I'll provide some examples of how to use assertive communication in the workplace and essentially foster it in your staff as well if you're an employer. So let's get started. The first communication style that I thought I would raise is passive communication. And when you're communicating in a passive way, what you might notice is yourself or obviously another person blending into the background a little bit. So what you might notice is them or yourself rarely saying no to things, working beyond personal limits, apologizing for things that aren't yet done. You might also notice some indications in your own or another person's body language. So for example, you might notice an avoidance of eye contact, poor posture. In fact, I'm noticing myself at the moment needing to sit up a little bit more straight. Essentially, this means that you are not expressing your own needs whilst often at the same time prioritizing the needs of another person. This is obviously ineffective because over time this means that the person who is communicating passively often can get a bit resentful in the workplace and burn out quite quickly. So not overall a particularly helpful style. Number 2 is aggressive communication. I'm sure we have all sort of heard of this or experienced this at some point. When you're communicating in an aggressive way, what you might notice is yourself or somebody else speaking overly loudly, interrupting others or sort of invading their personal space. In the online world, that could mean sort of multiple messages in quick succession, which can be quite overwhelming for the other person. Body language indications might be sort of really excessive and rigid use of hand gestures, using an overbearing posture, or maintaining intense eye contact, which makes the other person feel quite uncomfortable. This style is also ineffective, possibly for obvious reasons, but I'll explain it. Basically because it does allow you to express your needs, but you're doing it in a really confronting way and often not considering the needs of the other person. So you might feel as if you've gotten something off your chest, but you might actually later regret what you've said because you've sort of said it out of anger. and you might leave the other person feeling quite anxious or upset, which can obviously reduce their comfort in the workplace and potentially productivity as well. So again, aggressive communication, not an ideal style, but something to look out for. Thirdly, we've got passive-aggressive communication. And again, people tend to throw around this term a lot, so that gives me the understanding that a lot of people do understand what it means. But essentially, it's characterized by appearing quite passive or quiet on the surface, whilst showing sort of obvious aggressive motivations in behavior. So for example, someone might sound like they are agreeing or agreeable to a particular task or plan, but their actions don't align with this. So they might mutter things, they might roll their eyes, they might use sarcasm in a way that makes the other person feel uncomfortable, or they could give someone the silent treatment. This style of communication essentially means that you're not meeting the needs of yourself because you're not expressing your needs in any way, but you're also not considering the needs of the other person because they're feeling quite affronted by this behaviour. So it can be very frustrating for all involved, and again, not something that is particularly helpful in the workplace. Which brings me to assertive communication, and obviously this is the topic for today. Assertive communication is often misconstrued by people, particularly who tend to communicate in a passive style. They tend to think that it feels much more aggressive than it is, but I thought I'd explain it a little bit today, hopefully to give that distinction. Assertive communication is the most effective style because it does allow you to express your needs, but not in an aggressive way, not in a way that compromises the needs of the other person, which is what aggression is, as I said before. So this essentially means that you can get things off your chest as you need to and as is appropriate, but in a productive way and with respect to your colleague. So examples of this might be keeping boundaries at work consistent and actually saying no where you need to. If you're an employer, for example, raising a mistake with an employee, or explaining the values of the business or the requirements of the role whilst acknowledging that the mistake was likely not their intention, so sort of not blaming. You might also encourage others to speak to you about their concerns and inform them that you will take feedback on board. That's particularly helpful as an employer, but for anybody in the workplace, of course. Body language is also quite different too, so it can involve sort of friendly eye contact, smiling where appropriate, obviously, a clear voice, expansive hand gestures, so hand gestures that sort of indicate that the person is welcome and feeling understood, and good posture. As I said before, some people tend to feel quite uncomfortable about being assertive and sort of worry that expressing their opinions or concerns or saying no perhaps might be perceived as negative in their workplace. This is something that as an employer you can really take control of, and if you are an employer yourself, it might be worth communicating this distinction to your employees and essentially saying or reminding them that it's okay to raise concerns. It's okay to say no, and they won't be reprimanded for it. Obviously, if the employee is saying no to something that's part of their position description, then that might warrant a different discussion. But if they're exercising their boundaries, that's completely appropriate in the work context, and it can be helpful to outwardly have those discussions so that you're fostering sort of a culture of open communication in your workplace. And as I said right back at the beginning, if you are able to do this, whether you're an employee or an employer, this can be modelled to others in the workplace. Other people can see how others respond to this behaviour, and tend to be more inspired to adopt it themselves. So it can have a huge effect on how efficient you are in your business. If people are communicating honestly and openly and respectfully, things can be much more efficient. Obviously, the culture is a lot better because people are expressing their needs, but also being respectful of the other person. And when they're not feeling threatened, for example, somebody on the receiving end of an aggressive style of communication, they can become much more innovative. Same for people who, for example, adopt the passive style and overwork themselves to the point where they can't be innovative anymore because they've burnt themselves out. And passive aggression, as I said, is just unhelpful for everybody because it's just frustrating. And so when you're frustrated a lot of the time, you're less likely to be sort of creative and innovative. So in summary, just a quick summary of the 4 communication styles. We've got passive communication, which is where you're expressing, you're not expressing your own needs, but you are supporting the needs of the other person. Not really helpful. 2, aggressive communication, which is where you are expressing your own needs, but in quite a hostile way, without consideration of the other person's needs. Passive aggression or passive aggressive communication, which is where nobody's needs are met because you are appearing passive on the surface whilst sort of making it obvious that your intentions are aggressive. And finally, assertive communication, which is the reason any of the viewers here today are watching this video. That is where you're able to prioritize your needs, really express yourself, but in a way that is respectful of the other person and of their needs as well. So once you're able to practice that assertive communication, it can be a really handy tool in the workplace, whether you're an employee or an employer, and can really change sort of the environment in the business. So that is it for today. I would be really grateful for any sort of questions that anybody has. I would welcome, so please feel free to reach out either in the comments section or please feel free to directly message our business page and I will get back to you. But I hope everybody is staying safe and well, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.